I'm going to be doing a series on AI-powered applications and how LLMs and other forms of AI are going to have the capacity to really change the way we interact with the tools we take for granted. One of the interesting starting points that I think would be to talk about the internet, which, yes, is a pretty big general topic, but I think it's one that will be really interesting to explore. If you actually think about it, probably a lot of the tasks in your daily life are going to be executed through the internet. So then what happens? We search for something and we see the page and we end up on this space. And what we're presented with is a visual description of all of the information that this page creator wanted us to see. And these are design choices that have been embedded again and again in pages and applications for decades and decades. They are almost second nature to us. You see a menu, you know that you should scan it. You know that you should look at the links, find one that's relevant for you. These are a universal language. They are a design language that have been created around the applications that we use, based off of an understanding of the applications and the web that we've interacted with in the past. This is so ubiquitous that it's almost hard to imagine another way of interacting with the internet. We've seen minor shifts in this before, like when Alexa came along and we had Home Assistants, and there was a time where we could use our voice and say things like, "Hey, Alexa." Sorry to everyone whose Alexa just went off then. You could talk through voice, but these never got super popular. I think for a long while, and when these first came out, the voice recognition wasn't great. They were very limited in what they could actually do based off of your voice, so people just went, it's not really worth it. But I think the paradigm could shift again soon, and I think LLMs are gonna play a very large role in that. And what I want to touch on is the potential death of web pages as we know them. And more than that, the way we interact with the internet could change. A way of interacting with the internet that doesn't need this keyboard and doesn't need this mouse. The things that we design for our convenience quickly become cumbersome as we realize they have to fit into the everyday world of messy intentions and complexities and good and bad and attacks and innocence and misuse. And I think one of the interesting ones of the modern world and websites is contact forms and deposits and waiting for responses. Here's an experience that I've had recently. I'm engaged, and I'm looking to sort out the venue, the ceremony, and the catering for the wedding, okay? So those are three separate tasks. All of them have to happen on the same day. All of them expect to be involved at different times, and all three of them are gonna want you to put down a deposit and wait for them to get back to you with confirmation. So you have to book all three of these things without leaving one of the others or running the risk that you'll book this one, but then someone else will book this one, but you don't want to book this one before you've booked that one. It's chaos. Okay, so now let's pivot and talk about LLMs. What are LLMs? First of all, they're large language models. In essence, they're chatbots. You say something to them and they're going to respond to you with something that is probabilistic, something that's sensical. You'll ask it about a guide to doing X, Y, or Z, a guide to editing videos, and it will give you something reasonable. They are very often dismissively described as next word predictors, and they are next word predictors, but that's nothing to scoff at. That's an incredibly difficult task. Predicting the next word accurately requires an accurate understanding of context and the world, which is the reason why people communicate. So being able to accurately predict the next word implies an accurate understanding of the world to an extent. So what are some of the things these LLMs can do? Well, you've got ChatGPT. You can talk to them like conversational assistants, but unless you're in the tech space, there's another thing they can do that's maybe slightly less obvious, but you will have seen. So you might know that ChatGPT can talk to the internet. It can perform Bing searches for you, right? And it can also generate images by talking to DALL-E. LLMs can also write code pretty good because a lot of their training data is based off of code from scraping the internet and sites like Stack Overflow and forums where there are techie people discussing tech projects. This has become one of the fundamental uses for ChatGPT, I would say, amongst developers is the assistance of code writing. Not only that, but you have seen whole products spin off from this, such as Copilot. More than this though, LLMs can do something called function calling. I've got a bit of code that's gonna predict the weather in a city in the next hour. And then I've got another bit of code that tells you whether the night sky is gonna be clear enough to see different planets. And you tell that to the LLM. You say, I've got this code that does these, and this one needs a city name, and this one needs like a country and an altitude. Then you can talk to the LLM, and instead of just predicting the next word, sometimes it's gonna go, oh, I feel like I should do something with my code here. As an example, I say, What's the temperature going to be like in Bristol in the next couple of hours? That's the kind of thing where you want it to respond and say, oh, actually, I know a way of getting that information. You don't want it to hallucinate and just make it up and predict the next word of what it's going to be in Bristol. You want it to use data. You want it to use a real tool to get that information for you. And that's one of the things LLMs can do. They can hook into code that people have written, and it can decide when to run different pieces of that code based on context. Well, this is interesting because now you can break down the idea of doing something on the internet into component tasks, which is a desire, some statement, some action that you want. I'm trying to book X, Y, and Z for a wedding, venue, catering, and then you think, what would I do to go about booking all of those things? Well, first, I would break it down into tasks. I would say, task 1, book this, task 2, book that, task 3, book that. And then you'd say, what are my restraints? What are my requirements? That they all be on the same day, right? Well, then you turn searching the internet into a game of little tasks. It's picking a search word and then getting links based on a search word to websites, and then it's reading a website and extracting all of the information, collecting any contact details on a website, and then potentially sending an email to them. And then sending an email is also its own function, its own task down here somewhere. So you can lay out a bunch of these sort of atomic tasks that a lot of them in conjunction would allow you to do something like search the internet and book a service, right? So then you give those to an LLM, and now you can begin to imagine an entirely different kind of internet where we don't search through Google and then use our mouse and our keyboard. You can imagine using the voice instead. You could imagine saying, here's my problem, here's what I need done. Here's the situation. I need these things booked. They need to be on the same day. The LLM goes and it generates search terms. It optimizes SEO. It retrieves pages. And instead of taking you to those pages to view, it takes the data from them and then could construct on your screen a real-time dynamic display of all of the information relevant to you that the LLM has found, saying, well, here are some options that could work on this day, and here are some that could work on this day. Here are some new ideas. A, B, C, visualizations, content, and you refine and refine in a two-way conversation of description and then display. And you refine and refine until you say, I love that one. And then more atomic actions, contact, inquiry, deposit. This could fundamentally change the way that we interact with the internet. It's an LLM-driven operating system, an LLM-driven browser. Now, that's not necessarily the way things will go, but the point that I'm trying to highlight here is that there is a huge potential to abstract and simplify the interface between us as people and the way that we interact with large systems like the internet. And the tool for abstracting this interaction is large language models. By thinking about how we interact with the internet, breaking it down into tasks, and then allowing something to sit above us conversationally that we can talk to and direct that does the actual task processing. We had removed the need for a lot of these more archaic ways that we think of as being necessary for working with a computer. I think it would be really interesting for everyone to reflect on the way that this could impact us. I think the large-scale adoption of this kind of vision will take a while still, but I think ultimately we do move in the direction of more convenience, and I think this kind of communication and interaction style is ultimately more convenient in the long run. You could imagine a world where our websites and setting up your own business and setting up your social media pages are less involved, and you could imagine just speaking your will and having those things manifest, right? And I don't mean in a new age spiritual manifestation way. I mean empowered technologically, just taking thought, context, and desire and sequencing that into tasks to allow machines to manifest our intentions digitally, to create our profiles, to create our bios, to perform our searches, to do our bookings, to do our administration. I'd like to know what you guys think about this. I'd like to know if you agree. I'd like to know if you disagree. I'd like to know if you already see this happening. And how willing would you be to have a conversation with your computer? Is this something you already do? For myself, I know a year ago, I never would have thought that I would spend my time having a conversation with ChatGPT as if it was a person or a friend or an educator or a mentor. Now I talk to ChatGPT all the time, or I have a two-way conversation with ChatGPT to flesh out an idea in my head. It's become common practice. For me now, only a year in, it's really easy to imagine this world where it's like, okay, well, what if this could do my ordering of my groceries too? This is kind of the thing that Rabbit R1 promised, which is currently getting a bit of backlash because I think it's being perceived as under-delivering. But I think that that vision is not wrong and not impossible. I think that form of interaction is something that will only become more common with time. All right, so that's it on LLMs and the death of web pages. There'll be more coming on this series of how AI is going to change applications and the way we interact with them. If you'd like to see something specific, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, have a great week.